welcome back to LJG Sports. Today, it's an exciting day to be a Spurs fan. The Spurs drafted Dylan Harper at number 2, and they also drafted Carter Bryant at number 14. And for me, it was very exciting watching the draft. Obviously, Dylan Harper was the obvious pick at number 2. I was pretty sure the Spurs weren't going to trade away the 14th pick, but to see them stay at 14 and draft a very good prospect, someone that fell into their lap, it felt like, because it felt like Carter Bryant should have gone earlier. People were saying even in the top 10, but he falls to the Spurs at 14. So first, just overall thoughts on both of these prospects and what they can do and how they'll fit with the Spurs. And then we can go over kind of what this lineup and what the rotation can look like next season and what areas they need to really address in free agency now. But first, Dylan Harper, obviously. People were questioning whether Dylan Harper could still be valuable to the Spurs when the Spurs got the number 2 pick, because Dylan Harper is a guard, and he is a guard who also likes to run the pick and roll, but he can also is not a great shooter. And so people were wondering if the Spurs would trade this pick away, and maybe they would try to trade back into the top 10 and pick up a wing that they needed more than anything. But they still got that wing at 14. They drafted Harper at 2. They were smart, in my opinion, because even though you have Castle, you have De'Aaron Fox, even you have Devin Vassell, you can always use another guy who can dribble the ball. And it's not like he's can only do that. He can play combo guard. He can also play at the 3 if need be. Because of his great size at 6'6", he can be serviceable at the 3 if need be again. So I felt like it was the right decision. Take the best player available. It was clear that Cooper Flagg was the number 1 prospect. He was in a tier of his own, but I truly feel like Dylan Harper was the clear number 2. Would be the number 1 in a lot of draft picks. A lot of drafts. Last year, I think he would have gone number 1 for sure. So Spurs did right by not overthinking it and drafting Dylan Harper. Figure out the rest after that. And at 14, they drafted Carter Bryant. Now, me personally, I wanted them to get a big. I was hearing that the French big man, I can't think of his name right now off the top of my head, Joan Berenger. I heard they were he was going to the Spurs at 14. I was hoping for Thomas Sorber, just because I feel like you could draft a big and then figure out the rest, and honestly not even have to add in free agency. But they ended up getting Carter Bryant, who I thought necessarily wasn't going to be available at this pick. So the way that he fell, it ends up being a really good pick for the Spurs. Again, what I preferred, Thomas Sorber, who went actually right after to the Thunder, which is a really interesting pick, actually. But that's another topic for another video. Carter Bryant is a need for the Spurs because he has good size, good 3-and-D wing. I believe he's like 6'8", 6'9". He can shoot the 3. He can drive. He's athletic. He can guard 2 through 5, I think. Maybe even 1 sometimes. But he feels a need that the Spurs needed desperately. 3-point shooting, good size, and just another 3-and-D wing to add to this rotation. Now, and actually just before I move on, just to address, he does not, if you look up Carter Bryant and just look at his stats, you're not going to be impressed. Even if you look at his highlights, it's a lot of just catch and shoot threes, which is not a bad thing, by the way. But he was not used a lot at Arizona. He was a top 20 recruit coming out of high school. They really didn't use him at Arizona. A lot of ball-dominant guys there. So if you just look at the stats and even the highlights, you're not going to be that impressed. But you can see he has great size, has a lot of potential, still very young. And for his time that he played with Arizona, he did really well, I thought. So with that being said, what does the Spurs lineup look like after the draft? And who doesn't fit, who fits, who starts, who are rotational pieces, and what do the Spurs need to address in this coming free agency? Because I feel like the obvious need for the Spurs right now, obviously, is a backup big man. Like I said, I thought they would draft it at 14. And even in round 2, I think they gave their pick away to Indiana for a future second and some cash considerations. So I think unless we trade back up into the second round for a player we really like, the Spurs aren't drafting any more players this year. So it's free. We look to free agency now. We have, I believe, 12 people on the roster right now with the new additions of Harper and Bryant. So to fill out, you probably need 3 more players. But you especially need a backup big man. I don't think you can play Sohan at the backup big spot. I think you need a true rim protector. I don't think they're signing or re-signing Bismack Biyombo or Charles Bassey or even Sandro Mamukelashvili. None of them ever really worked out. Bismack Biyombo was definitely serviceable, but not someone to look for in the future. Charles Bassey has potential, but just injuries has really plagued his career as of the start. And then Sandro Mamukelashvili, who is a really good piece. I think smart player, limited athletically and defensively, a bit undersized for the center spot, and just not a true rim protector. And I feel like he'll go somewhere else where they can maybe use him a little better. At least I hope, and he gets some good playing time with another team. But I just don't think that's going to work with the Spurs. We need a true backup big who can keep the defense afloat when Wemby's off the court. Because we saw last year when Wemby's on the floor, offensively and defensively, much better. But defensive rating for sure, we're like a top 10 defense. And then when he is off the court, we're like a bottom 3, bottom 5 defense. So definitely need to address the backup big spot. Other than that, the other 2 spots we need to fill on this roster are really just third string guys, I feel like, because we have so much depth. So with that being said, we need a backup big. And I'm going to shape the roster with that in mind. I'm not going to say like, oh, Sohan, like, he can play the 5. We're going to work with what we got right now. We need a backup big. In free agency, we will get one. So that spot is vacant. Again, we'll sign 2 other guys probably for the third strings. And then, and I'm not even going to worry about the rest of the third string. What we're going to talk about is the 10-man rotation mainly. As of right now, you can assume that Blake Wesley and Malachi Branham are still on the third string. If the Spurs end up trading someone who doesn't necessarily fit the roster anymore, or to free up some cap space, or for another player that they really like, maybe one of them can fill in for one of the guard spots. But as of right now, Wesley and Branham are not beating any of the guards we have in rotation right now, including Dylan Harper, Devin Vassell, Stephon Castle, De'Aaron Fox. There's just no room for them to play, which kind of sucks because I do like parts of Blake Wesley's game. His defense, his athleticism, his speed, his high motor. And I like a lot of Malachi's game too. Secondary ball handling, spot-up shooter, can run the pick and roll really well. And I've always said this, if they were like combined with their attributes, they'd have been such a good player. But both of them lack in certain areas. Malachi on the defensive end, Wesley on the offensive end, and particularly shooting and scoring overall. But with that being said, we're going to assume that the Spurs are going to sign a backup big man because we desperately need one. And then we're not going to worry about the third string because Malachi, Wesley are already 2 of those spots. And then I believe the other 2 free agents will sign is just to fill out the rest of the roster. So that does leave 1 spot in the third string. That means we have 9 spots for 10 guys that we have right now. So someone is not going to get playing time on this team. And I'll go over who I think that is and whether we should trade him or not or what's going to happen there. But let's just get into it. So first, let's just talk about some locks. De'Aaron Fox will be the starting point guard. Victor Wembanyama will be the starting center. I feel like that's very obvious. Unless you're some crazy guy who believes Fox should come off the bench, and then you believe that Wemby can play the 4 better. But in all actuality, in all reality, Fox is the 1, Wemby is the 5. They're your 2 best players. We'll probably extend Fox this summer. Wemby is a once-in-a-lifetime generational alien. They are the 1 and 5. And I feel like the next part you have to answer to this rotation is, how do you handle the rest of the guards? Fox is your point guard number 1. You still have point guard 1. You still have point guard 2, shooting guard 2, and your starting shooting guard to worry about. And I feel like the 3 guys who are going to be those guards and fill out the rest of the guard rotation is obviously Dylan Harper, the number 2 pick. Stephon Castle, the reigning Rookie of the Year, and Devin Vassell, who was a lottery pick, and I think making the most money besides De'Aaron Fox on this team. So, what I've seen a lot of people say is Fox-Castle backcourt, Fox-Harper backcourt, and yeah, Harper and Castle may have more of a long-term future on this team than Devin Vassell, but what I will say is with Fox at your one and not really being a three-point threat, you would like to have some offense spread out on this team, especially in the starting lineup. For that reason, I think the Spurs should sign Vassell. But if they don't, if they go Castle or Harper, I think it can still work too. And then the other two guys would be the backup 1 and 2. So if Fox and Castle start, it would be Harper and Vassell coming off the bench. If Fox and Harper start, it would be Castle and Vassell. And then what I think in all actuality will happen, Fox your 1, Devin Vassell your 2 to space out the floor. Harper and Castle be your 2 combo guards to run this second unit, which I think is really cool and would be really cool to see. I think if that happens, I feel like Stephon Castle could be 6th man of the year if Dylan Harper gets enough playing time as like a 6th, 7th man. I feel like he can be Rookie of the Year depending on how well Cooper Flag plays. So that's your guard rotation for sure. You already have your big man, and your backup big man will be signed in free agency, you think. So that leaves 5 wings on this team with 4 spots left. Your starting small forward, your starting power forward, and then your backup small forward, your backup power forward. The other one is not going to have any time on this team. And those 5 wings are Julian Champagnie, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, Carter Bryant, who we just acquired via the 14th pick, and Harrison Barnes. So who is going to be left out? If you asked me, I don't think they're trading Carter Bryant because we literally just got him. I would also think that because Jeremy Sohan was reportedly untouchable in any talks for trading for Kevin Durant, he is safe too. That leaves Johnson, Champagnie, and Barnes. And I would also like to throw in there that I think Julian Champagnie is safe only because with all these mouths to feed on this team, Harper, Castle, Vassell, Fox, Wemby, Julian Champagnie fits the mold of catch and shoot 3 and D guy. He doesn't need the ball in his hands on the offense. He spreads out the offense. All he has to do is roam the 3-point line and shoot. And defensively, he has good size to guard. He's also on a very good contract. We just signed him to. He's making like $3 million, $4 million a year. And he averaged like 10 points last year for us. A viable starter for that money in today's NBA is really good. So I don't think they're trading Julian Champagnie. So that leaves Harrison Barnes and Keldon Johnson. And who brings more value to the table? Do you want Keldon Johnson or Harrison Barnes? And they both have strengths and weaknesses in different areas. Both of them making around the same money, so cap isn't really an issue. If you're looking to trade someone who had more money, I believe Keldon Johnson is making $19 million next year. Harrison Barnes is making like $18 million next year. Keldon Johnson with 2 more years left on his deal, and then Harrison Barnes 1 year left, I believe. Johnson is obviously younger. Still has potential in the sense that he did average 21, 22 points per game for the Spurs 1 year. Was the number 1 guy before we drafted Wemby. Has still potential. Great slasher. Great physical guy who can get downhill and score? Or do you want Harrison Barnes, who is older but brings that leadership, can shoot the 3, shot really well from 3 last year, and is just a steady, good defender who can guard the 3 or 4? To me, it's obvious. I think you keep Harrison Barnes. As sad as it is, Keldon Johnson, I do believe, has no place on this team anymore. And making around $19 million per year, I do think the Spurs will trade him for who knows what. Either future draft capital or maybe a big man we're looking for. But I just don't see a world where Keldon Johnson gets any playing time on this team. I felt like if the Spurs did draft Thomas Sorber at 14 or a big at 14, you could slide Keldon Johnson as a backup 3. But because of lack of 3-point shooting and just, sadly, his contract, which isn't even bad, I just don't feel like he has any place on this team. So with that being said, I don't know who the Spurs are going to start at the 3 and 4. Any of these guys could work. You could either go Champagnie, Sohan, you could go Bryant, Barnes, you could go Bryant, Sohan, you could go Champagnie, Barnes. Anything would work, honestly, and it all really depends what you want. And it depends on who your starting combo guards are. Because if you start Fox and, let's say, Castle, who both shoot like 30% from 3, you definitely want some floor spaces out there. So I believe it would be like Barnes and Champagnie, or Barnes and Bryant. But if you keep Vassell in the starting lineup, then you can get away with putting the better defender out there in Sohan, and then you could throw either Barnes or Bryant or Champagnie at the 3, and the other 2 can be the backups. But those are your 4 rotational wings. And for Keldon Johnson, sadly, like I said, I really like KJ, but sadly, I believe his time in San Antonio is done with the Spurs drafting Carter Bryant at 14. So that's what I think the Spurs lineup will look like. If I had to guess right now, it would be Fox, Vassell, Champagnie, Sohan, Wemby, your starting lineup, and your backup unit would be Dylan Harper, Stephon Castle, Carter Bryant, Harrison Barnes, and then a backup big we signed in free agency. We can talk about that in another video. And sadly, yeah, I just think Keldon's gone. Let me know what you think about the Spurs draft. If you had to give it a letter grade, what would you give it? I would give it personally A+. You got possibly the best player in this draft. And then you also got a wing player who's a 3-and-D wing, who was supposed to go in the top 10 in Carter Bryant. I think it's an A+, maybe an A, because Dylan Harper's not really like an A+ pick in the sense that that's the guy you had to get at 2 anyway, right? But yeah, let me know what you think about these projections. How do you think the Spurs lineup will look like next year? Who do you think the starting 5 will be? And what do you think the Spurs are going to do with Keldon Johnson? Or if you think they're going to trade away someone else, who do you think the odd man out is on this roster? Let me know what you agree with, disagree with down in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you guys.